Welcome back to Squawk Box. President Biden's energy policies are under scrutiny as he prepares to visit oil-rich Saudi Arabia on Friday. For more on this, I want to bring in Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. Senator Cotton recently wrote a letter to BlackRock raising questions about the company's ESG activities, and we want to thank him for joining us. And that's where I want to go with this conversation, Senator, because you have been outspoken and recently, as we said, just wrote this letter to BlackRock, effectively saying that their policies and their power and influence over companies around ESG are too much. What's the argument you're making, and then we can maybe dig into it?
Well, Andrew, what Larry Fink and BlackRock have done, in part through collusion with this climate action partnership, is essentially create a climate cartel. They are trying to suppress investment in the fossil fuel industry in America. And I know you have a lot of CEOs and investors who watch. I would just say this: if you're thinking about joining this climate cartel, you better think again and you better lawyer up. There's a reason why America's top law firms are already advising their clients to be wary here, because this is contributing to $5 a gallon gas. And when Republicans take charge in November, I'm going to make sure that the Congress is investigating these matters. This is almost certainly a breach of these firms' fiduciary duties, probably a civil violation of the antitrust laws, exposing them to triple damages, and very possibly a criminal violation. When we win back the White House in 2024 and the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission is no longer an ideological and partisan weapon against the oil and gas industry, some of these executives could be facing time in federal prison. So I would just encourage everyone to think carefully.
Senator, we're going to take the temperature down for just a second. I want to dig into this issue, and I also want to dig into the issue because, by you coming on television and being this outspoken, in a way you are, it's a bit of a signal, maybe more than a signal, to the rest of the business community to effectively stand down on potentially, and this is where I was going to go with this, an issue that they feel is the right investment decision. And that's where I want to ask you about. You've obviously been a big believer. I believe in capitalism. I've seen your quotes over the years on our show and elsewhere, a believer in the free markets. There is an argument to be made that there is money to be made by investing in climate, in clean technologies and the like. And clearly, I would argue to you that if BlackRock were sitting here right now, they would make that argument. They would say that pension funds around the world, potentially European pension funds, we could debate the implication of that, but others have decided to pull their money from one place and put their money from another place. And what they've been telling their investors and their clients is that we should be following that trend because that's where the money is.
Well, it's where the government money is, Andrew. Sure, there may be money to make in these industries because their Democratic pals in Congress are rewarding them with all kinds of tax breaks and government subsidies. But the simple fact is that these companies may be making money coming and going. A lot of these ESG funds have higher fees than other funds. Moreover, BlackRock and Larry Fink and other firms like his insist that they have not divested from fossil fuels. So for all we know, they are simply trying to increase the stock prices of companies like Exxon so they can make more money on that end of the scam as well.
I don't understand the scam of this. If in fact they are keeping their investments in fossil fuels, which they are, and by the way, they get criticized, of course, from the left for doing that, and in fact are now also putting money or encouraging companies to spend or to invest more in climate because they believe that that's where the future is from an investment perspective. What's wrong with that?
It's not simply that they're trying to invest in so-called green technology, Andrew. It's that they're trying to withhold capital, trying to deny access to the equity and the debt markets to these fossil fuel companies or companies that use fossil fuels.
But you just said that they're not divesting from an Exxon or any of the energy companies.
It kind of resembles a pump and dump scheme, Andrew. In one moment, they're saying we're going to cut off access. That means there's underinvestment in the oil and gas industry, which means there's not enough supply.
Both of us just stipulated that they're not doing that. They're not divesting.
But Andrew, they're trying to cut. That's the stated goal of climate action, is to cut off access to the capital markets to these companies. That's the reason why we're pumping almost 1 million barrels fewer per day of oil in this country, even though demand has spiked. Normally, when demand spikes, you'd see oil and gas companies rushing into the oil patch trying to produce more. They're not. That's why they have record high profits. If Joe Biden and the Democrats don't like the profits of oil and gas companies, they should increase production, which will bring those profits down and bring down the price of gas at the pump. One reason you don't see that increased production is because oil and gas companies are being targeted by this climate cartel.
So, I mean, here's the question that I would ask, just a sort of a quote-unquote free market. I think there's a lot of forces at play that have led to the moment that we're in. Part of it's politics, there's no question. You're looking at public pension funds, as I said, in the U.S., but probably more importantly in Europe, that have led to what we're talking about in the energy sector. There's no question about that, I don't think. And I know you have issues with the Biden administration, of course, in terms of their approach to this. But in terms of the decisions that businesses are making, I think on an individual basis, unless you really do believe that this is a cartel and an antitrust issue, what's to say that this is what they want to do and whether they should be able to do that on their own?
Well, it is a cartel and it is an antitrust issue, and it's not Larry Fink and BlackRock using his own money. It'd be one thing if you had someone like Warren Buffett using his own money. I disagree with it, but it's his own money. Larry Fink is taking money from millions of retail investors and then using the power he has by managing those shares to vote new boards of directors onto these companies or insist that they change their policy as opposed to maximizing shareholder value. The reason he's doing that, in part, is this ideological opposition to the oil and gas industry in America. You see it reflected in his Democratic friends in the Congress or the White House. Joe Biden would rather go to Venezuela or Iran to get more oil and gas than he would go to Texas or Arkansas, Louisiana, and North Dakota.
What do you think of, I mean, when you come on the air and have these discussions, there are CEOs obviously who are watching us right now, and I think that they're hearing you, and again, you know, if you win in 22, 24, et cetera, given what you just said about putting people in jail and the like, that will make them have potentially a different view of this. But isn't that politics over business? No, that is called applying the law in a neutral and even-handed way. The antitrust laws are very clear on these kind of cartels, combinations, and conspiracies. And there are real victims here, not just companies that use these fuels or that produce them, but families in Arkansas who are trying to stretch their budgets to make them to pay for $5 a gallon gas or to pay for diesel for their tractors. There are real victims here that are the target of these cartels. So a lot of fancy investment bankers can feel good about themselves. So they can think they drive an electric car when really they're driving a coal-powered car as opposed to a gas-powered car. But how do you feel about a bank being able to make a decision about who to make a loan to, for example? This is an issue. We were talking about the Second Amendment in the last hour. There's some banks that have made certain decisions, I think based on risk, but maybe you think on politics about how to approach the gun industry. And for example, in the state of Texas, JP Morgan and Citigroup have frankly struggled to underwrite municipal bonds in that state because they've been required to effectively say, you know, we will loan effectively to anybody. And it changes the dynamic, though, because clearly politics have now entered the fray. Well, politics has entered the fray of a lot of these major corporations that are run by executives or have 27-year-old liberal MBAs whispering in their ear in the corporate headquarters about things like the climate cartel, or as you say, on an individual basis, trying to divest from what they view as disfavored industries, even if those industries are highly profitable. They shouldn't be surprised when conservative states stand up to reflect the views of their conservative voters. And there's a lot of states like Texas who have a lot of money under investment, and a lot of these Wall Street bankers would probably like to manage that money, but they shouldn't expect those states to give them that money when they are targeting our voters' views and interests and aspirations for divestment.
So, Senator, I guess 2022, if your party were to control either house, there'd be one thing. Then you talked about 2024, but just in terms of trying to help the fossil fuel industry in the United States, what needs to be done? There's executive orders, I guess, that would have to be reversed? Is there active legislation that you would institute that would open up areas or get rid of some of the regulations on refiners? I mean, what would you do? What should be done in your view if things change in 2022 and 2024? And how long does it take for those to bear fruit? How long are we going to be stuck with, close to $100 oil?
Joe, there's no single solution because there's no single weapon the Democrats have used to strangle our oil and gas industry. It's kind of been a slow strangulation. But there are steps that we can take. We can ensure that the Department of Interior is offering lease plans, is selling or offering new sales. We can ensure that they're making permits available for companies who already have leases. We can streamline the permitting and approval process for major multi-billion-dollar capital expenditures like new pipeline systems or liquefied natural gas export facilities. These are all signals to the industry and to investors that the fossil fuel industry is a good, safe investment that will produce returns for decades to come. Maybe most basically, we'll just stop the rhetorical war on oil and gas and coal in America, because every time Joe Biden or Chuck Schumer or Bernie Sanders launches that war, it just makes it less likely that investment money will go into the industry. We should be celebrating America's oil and gas industry. We shouldn't be looking down our nose, as Joe Biden and the Democrats do, at coal miners and roughnecks in America while they turn a blind eye to Chinese slaves who are making their solar panels or African child laborers who are making the minerals for their electric vehicles.
Senator, with respect, I think when you look, though, at a lot of the folks in the investment community that are making decisions around investing in clean tech or other things like that, or frankly, moving their money in that direction, they're making a long-term bet. And I would argue, by the way, in the short term, it has had an impact on the cost of fuel and energy prices today. No question. And perhaps that was a mistake. I didn't even know it's perhaps. It was a mistake because clearly this is going to take the evolution of this is going to take a lot longer than I think people had imagined, and is creating some of these issues that we're confronting today. But at the same time, I think you would agree that over the next 10 years, I don't know, 15 years, you name whatever you think the time period is, that there's going to be a lot of opportunity in the world of clean energy and climate tech. And I think that's where we ultimately, as a country, probably want to go. I think you would agree with that. Am I wrong?
No, Andrew, for our lifetime, oil and gas and coal and nuclear are still going to be the most reliable and affordable sources of energy for America. We get almost 90% of our energy from those sources. Even if you look at renewable fuels, we get more than twice as much energy in this country from water and wood and crops as we get from wind and solar combined. So wind and solar power may be a part of the energy mix. They may provide solutions, especially on a local scale here and there. But the idea that we are simply going to stop using oil, gas, coal, and nuclear power to power this country, to literally power our economy, is fantasy. And it's what's contributed to Arkansans paying almost $5 a gallon for gas.
Well, I will tell you this. I do not disagree with you at all on the nuclear. It's an issue that I think we have not addressed in this country
we haven't also addressed
properly.
Senator, is we already have the cleanest. I mean, if that's your thing, if low emissions is your thing, we're already there in terms of natural gas. The actual impact that we can make as a country versus India and China over the next 20 years, and while maybe, I'm not worried about us that we have to tighten our belts, but we're seeing around the world right now that even lesser developed countries that are expected to hit certain emissions goals, it's already having an effect, while Germany is going to be forced to go back to coal, and India and China are opening more coal plants than they have in the past. So, I mean, do you believe that we can make a difference as a country single-handedly on lowering the emissions in the next 25 years without the help of China
Joe,
and India?
Joe, you make a good point. We already have made a difference. Greenhouse gas emissions have been declining in this country for 15 plus years. The way we could continue to make a difference is to invest more in natural gas production, and certainly investing more in nuclear power generation. But China produces more than double the greenhouse gas emissions we do. And let's just say that China is not going to stop its efforts to grow its economy to overtake us, to replace us as the world superpower, because John Kerry wants to have some big signing agreement on some climate accord.
They probably fund half the ESG, China, and they're laughing as they're funding it, and we're, you know, they have no intention of. I don't think they feel Korean at all in China, and they're looking at us thinking, wow, we'll just pass them like they're standing still while they're feeling really virtuous.
Well, and let's remember, too, that not only is China probably funding it, like Russia has funded the anti-fracking movement in the West over the last 20 years, but they are benefiting from it. China is the world's largest producer of so-called green technology, largely through state subsidies and other mercantilist policies. America is one of the world's largest producers of oil and gas. It would be a geopolitical catastrophe for us to underwrite the energy industry of our main enemy while we are strangling our main source of energy.
It is a longer conversation. We appreciate you having it with us, and we hope to have you back to continue this dialogue. Appreciate it. Thank you.